and welcome to the Design Rescue Show, where we take a behind-the-scenes look at the unique journeys of creative professionals, and we learn about the choices they've made that have shaped their career paths. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, David Block, and today it's my pleasure to welcome the CEO and Creative Director of Live Large Design, Adele Wiejaczka. Welcome to the show, Adele.
Hi, so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad you can make it.
Thank
And so this show is kind of a behind the scenes tour of your career journey. And so, what I like to do is let's start at the very beginning by talking about where you first became interested in design and then how your education sort of influenced your career direction. So my first question is, how did your early experiences in Alaska? So you were a traveler, right? So you've been a traveler, been to Alaska, you've been to Bali,
Yep.
been to Colorado.
Yep.
I don't get out much, so that's awesome. But I'd like to know how your experiences in these places have sort of influenced your decision to enter the design world.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I think even before I was a traveler, art was just a big part of my life. So my dad's a fine artist, grew up with him, doing a lot of portrait work and landscapes, just totally enamored with his ability. I would say I'm much less of a natural artist, or at least my aesthetic is more abstract. So that was just very different from his experience. And I grew up with a heavy interest in art. He would take us down to Chicago and we'd go to UTRAC and we'd get to pick out something. So I'd get like really cool color pencils or clay to make, whatever. And that was just a really special part of our life, like this aspect of art. And my parents really instilled in me and my brothers this concept of anything made is greater and better than anything purchased. So I think that was always a big part of my journey and set the stage, but it took me a really, 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 really long time to relate to being an artist as well as a designer. So I think I always knew I wanted to create. That's always been a big part of my life. And when I was 3, I pulled my first all-nighter. I wrote a post on it because I literally stayed up till like 3 a.m. making these homemade hearts. And that was like my first, creative project. And I had to make 100, and my parents still have them. It's hilarious. Maybe I'll send you a picture. They were like, like the watercolor, thick paper. And I was just little trying to cut it with kids, scissors. And the assignment was actually about counting. It was not about making 100 things. So that's also started my kind of overachieving persona as well. So yeah, when I went into, college, I initially started out in an art program, but wanted to move west. And that kind of kicked off my travel life. But I always knew, design, art, having my own business was, going to be an aspect of my life. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers, kind of the beginning of the question. I've had a very meandering journey. So I got my undergrad in environmental ed, and something I like to share is just, when we're young and we have all these like divergent experiences, I think it takes time to understand how they all fit together. So my brand, Live Large Design, has really culminated, over the past 12 years. And in the beginning, it was frustrating to have like this undergrad degree in environmental education. And then I ended up getting my MFA in graphic design. And the neat thing is I've always been an aspect of an educator and an artist and an outdoor, nomadic human. So those have all kind of come together now, between the niches that I've worked in, the industries I've worked in, and just, people who have shared values that like to work with me because they know I get remote work before that was popular, or they appreciate like kind of my agility in business and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Excellent. So you said that you have a background in environmental education as well, right?
Yep.
So I'm actually really curious. So first of all, you did say you have a master's in fine art. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. From the Academy of Art University. Excellent. And so how did those two sort of backgrounds kind of mesh, and how do they work their way? Let me say that this way. How did you infuse them, or do you infuse them into your career?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I must have been like 18. I was on a NOLS trip, if you've heard of National Outdoor Leadership School. So I became a wilderness guide at 18. And One of our mentors on that trip, or instructors, I remember him saying something like, get your undergrad in whatever, and then get your master's in what you really want to do, but like go experience the world in between the two. And so I didn't realize how much I actually embodied that journey. So environmental ed was amazing because I learned, a lot about the educational world. I ran a summer camp in Northern Alaska. I got to, just kind of be in that education side of things. And I love nature. That's kind of like a piece of who I am and how I find my inspiration, my calm, my centeredness. So I think nature has been like a really important building block in my life. And it also really supports my creativity. And yeah, Academy of Art, they welcome people from different degrees. They're just like, it's going to be difficult. So that was really fun. It was difficult, but a couple of years after I graduated, they then invited me back to come to teach. And that was just a really cool moment in my career. And also, kind of this full circle of, education impact. And then the other aspect I would say about my environmental ed career and my guiding career is those became my first clients because I love the outdoor industry. I know a lot about environmental education. So I actually have branded conservation centers in Alaska. And again, many of these people are my friends. We are on the same side of certain really important issues. And so I think they could trust their creative or marketing or branding with someone like me because I had a bit more depth in that industry and I just kind of got it. So if you're newer and you're starting off, I always think it's really important to build a bridge between you and your audience in some way that's really meaningful. So that was really special for me. I remember some of my early clients, I'd often go and meet in person and they're still friends today. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Would you be able to talk about one of those projects, one of those early projects?
Yeah, I mean, two come to mind. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Iditarod. It's a dog mushing race across Alaska. So this was something I was obsessed with my whole life since I was 3. A lot happened for me at 3, apparently. And I do have proof of this because when we graduated high school, they put our kindergarten dreams, and mine was move to Alaska and run sled dogs. So I did end up doing that. But one of my early clients, they're called Squid Acres Kennel, and it's a couple. They're just amazing. She just ran Iditarod and got 5th. But I built their website. I actually think they're still using it. It's not mobile because I was pre heavy mobile stuff, kind of a WordPress site back then. And I branded them with this like really cool hand-drawn, the squids coming out of the S, and they're still using it. And now that's kind of splattered across all their merch. And it's really neat to see that represented like in a physical sense. And also so closely related to an entity that I really love. I love running dogs. I've, watched their dogs at their kennel back in the day when I lived up there. So that was really special. And then another one that comes to mind is called Alaska Conservation Foundation. So I think I was there essentially, contract designer for, 4 years, somewhere in there. And I rebranded them. Alaska's kind of funny because a lot of Alaskans like the state of Alaska in their branding. So it's not always my most favorite shape, but it was fun to work with them. And they just put out a lot of amazing conservation information, education, and then the political side of it. So I'm just, honored to be a part of such a really profound entity. Alaska's got massive natural lands and preserves and all of that good stuff. So it was neat to partner with them in that sort of way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, excellent. So, and moving on a little bit further, when you started, first of all, I'd like to know when it was that Live Large Design was actually launched. Do you remember when
so it was 2011, and I was living in a dry cabin in Fairbanks, so it's northern Alaska. Dry cabin means no plumbing, and I had a little internet card, so definitely dating myself there.
I see. Okay. All right. And so, that must have been a significant step. And so what were the main challenges that you faced in launching and starting that business?
Oh gosh, like everything. So ate a lot of beans and rice, I, as a trained designer, and I think I actually was just starting out my grad program. So I kind of got this mesh of design plus freelance world. And yeah, I mean, when you skip undergrad in art school and then you just go directly to your master's and maybe even undergrad, they do this too. It's like, it's a lot of it's self-learned in terms of programs and that sort of thing, and the business side. So I would say the business side of freelance, of being a designer, was the most challenging, and also what I see in a lot of my students, because we're not necessarily taught the business side of it. So we either have to self-teach, or we go through kind of painful iterations with clients. And I also would argue, I don't really love the word freelance, because I just think that's kind of the wrong connotation to designers being sort of like workhorse, just the technical side of it. I think people kind of lose the focus of like the art background. When I create, I have to be connected to what I create, to the entity, the purpose, because my creation is coming from within me. This isn't like, I can just like bust something out. So especially in the beginning, that was really important. I think I've learned to hone my productivity and my focus throughout my career in different ways. But yeah, I would definitely think the business side of it. And I mean, like writing contracts, figuring out that sort of stuff. I finally ended up working for a couple lawyers, and they worked with me on my contracts.
Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. I noticed that you have 4 distinct services that are listed on your site. You've got branding,
Mm-hmm.
launch your course,
Mm-hmm.
video production,
Mm-hmm.
and sales funnel audit. And I'd love to hear a little bit about each, if you could talk about those services.
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure y'all can relate. Like everything's always in flux. But I started off strongly with branding. So that's been kind of the core offer. And I love branding, and pretty much everything I do starts with that process. You guys get it. It's like, if we don't have clarity in our brand, how can I go make your book design or your website? That also took me a little bit to kind of flush out, because people would hire me to build their website, but they didn't have any branding. So I'd have to do it. And I essentially would do it for free in the beginning by accident. So it's essentially where I start. And then I actually launched my own course back in the beginning of COVID. So I don't know, somewhere 6 years ago, I was teaching undergrad university, and just kind of saw this, it's slow moving in a 4-year degree to getting to monetizing. So I ended up launching my own course for designers, so they could start monetizing as quickly as 12 weeks, learning kind of the business side of it. And I discovered some like really cool platforms. So, no code platforms that really maximize my skill set. So I actually niched in e-learning, which again brings me back to this education theme that's been existent throughout my career. And I like absolutely love it, because, my clients, they're often service-based businesses that are looking to provide more impact and, stop tying money to time. And so they come to me, I build out the branding for the course and essentially their full website as well. And then their offer suite. So a lot more of the marketing side of it. And then also the back end of the course. So that's where a lot of my, knowledge in education and curriculum comes to help support these self-built platforms.
I see. Okay, excellent. And so I also noticed that you work with non-governmental organizations, NGOs,
Mm-hmm.
and social organizations, and that's really interesting to me. And I'm curious if you could share a specific project that required a deeper understanding of the complex social sort of environmental issues that are involved.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
such good questions. So yeah, I mean, I have always been, intrigued by nonprofits. And then when I moved overseas, NGOs, and, I think it's important to give back, to find ways to support, the causes that we care about. So every year I try to sponsor some sort of NGO. I also get hired by, NGOs and nonprofits too. So they're a big part of my portfolio. But a really impactful one was when I was living in Bali. And I did find it harder overseas to find ways to support local community, because I was so engaged with the Alaskan community for a decade. It, when you move somewhere new, it takes a little bit longer. There's a lot of cultural dynamics. I started going to Bali quite some time ago, like 2017. So it's built up a lot. It's very interesting, but I absolutely love Indonesia and Indonesians. But, hopefully people have some awareness that like Bali is one piece of the larger Indonesian picture. So neighboring island, it's called Nusa Penida, just extreme poverty. And so I think, anyway, we raised maybe $3,000, and we were able to provide food and amenities to, I think, 300 families. So it's kind of insane how far the American dollar can go in some of these places. And a lot of what we're seeing on Instagram in a place like Bali is going to be like those very Instagram glam shots. So one of my favorite projects, and if you kind of snoop on my stuff, water has been a massive theme in my life. I became a raft guide when I was 18, and essentially my first picture when I was 2 weeks old is on Lake Michigan. It's just, I'm such a water baby. And clean water is a major issue in Indonesia. And so often what they'll do is boil the water, which uses a lot of resources, drink dirty water. And so anyway, there's a company called Social Impact, and spelled with a K, Impact. And Jerome owns and runs it. And so he's someone I met in kind of the entrepreneurial community when I first went to Bali. And so I was able to work with him and help support him with his branding, because he created a crowdfunding campaign for the essentially like launch of these water filters. And he didn't actually own the technology behind it, but he branded a variation of it and was able to bring it to Bali. And it's super cool. There's a really good brand now that I know in America. It's like the best water filter, but they're very similar. It's like gravity feed. So you have the big piece here, and then, filter. They're essentially 20 USD, dollars. So pretty affordable. Yeah. And my branding helped support his crowdfunding to go through. They made 60K USD to be able to fund his first campaign. And he's really continued from there. And he would go into villages all around Indonesia. And he doesn't just deliver water filters. He actually educates on improving, life improvement, because clean water is like essentially can break poverty cycles. So that was really, really incredible. The filters themselves, I can really stand behind. They'll never, they might over 10 years stop producing, water, but they'll never not filter the water. So it's not like your filters at home that, aren't doing their job. And we would also use them. So like my co-work space uses them, but you literally can take, water from the river and put them through these filters, which is pretty incredible. So I think that was a really special project. And then the Nusa Penida project as well, that kind of came to mind as I was telling a story that was kind of separate. That was a good friend. She's Indonesian, and for her birthday, she wanted to do this relief trip to Nusa Penida. And I think we all cried for like 3 days, because it was just like such an incredible, Indonesians are some of the most happy, grateful, caring, people you could ever be around. But wealth to them meant having a pillow, for example. And so that was part of our care package. And I also got to go to like very, very neat places, because the locals, we got access to really unique places. So I, on the back of a motorbike down this precarious trail to somewhere, and then the locals will give you like their best coconut, fresh coconut or whatever. But it was very, very special.
Oh, that's awesome. Those projects seem like they would be super satisfying to be a part of. And, we don't get a lot of those sort of experiences in the normal everyday graphic design work that we do. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
So now you have, with Live Large Design, you manage a team of people that are remote. Mm-hmm. Right. And so in different locations from around the world. And I'd like to know how you deal with collaboration and maintaining creativity across the distances.
Ugh, such good questions. I'm pretty big on connections. So however you can cultivate that, that can be virtual co-work spaces. There's actually an app for that. That's pretty cool. And then just, putting effort and energy into my team. So I actually found a lot of my designers because I ran an internship, again, going back to education. But I wanted to train them in the way that I had devised my branding process. And so they showed up as well. They didn't pay for the internship, but they also didn't get paid. And so there's a little controversy around that sort of thing. I was very confident in the process that I was going to teach them, and that they were going to benefit in their own freelance lives with that process. So my first cohort, I think, was five women, and they all went through it, and then I hired them all. And we all just really enjoyed each other. And there was a moment where one of them, just kind of shared her experience working for a woman and feeling heard. And I thought that was really interesting, because you don't really know when you do business on your own, like how you relate to kind of, another creative director or another designer. And so I do a lot of video critiques, and I learned that from my program. So my master's degree was all online. I would show up sometimes in person for the fun stuff. But I actually think online critiques, video critiques are a really effective way to work in the design world. And I don't know, I would work from co-work spaces and I'd like speak into my, my little Apple things. And I think I'd talk really softly and they're like, we love listening to your critiques. And I thought that was really cute because it's all, constructive. It's all how they can improve the piece. But I would say I'm very energized by collaboration. I'm an introvert at heart, but when it comes to creative work, I mean, it's like Christmas when I get work from my designers and I'm like, I would have never done it that way. And I love that. I have, I'm pretty proud of my own personal aesthetic at this point, but there's limitations within that. I don't do like a lot of calligraphy or I'm not an amazing illustrator, so when we can come together and create something beyond what we could have done alone, I think that's really kind of where the magic is. And to me, that's what an agency means. It's something beyond just myself.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Excellent. Fantastic. We're going to move on just a little bit.
Cool.
Actually, sort of have another question on the same topic. Actually, I'm curious, when you changed from being a hands-on designer and then now you're guiding a strategic direction of Live Large Design, what was the challenge in making that transition?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think a lot of us as designers, we're pretty detail focused. We're perfectionists. I would relate to being highly sensitive. And I mention that because I pick up on a lot. And I think that makes me a great designer because I can, pick up on things going on with my client. When they say they don't like blue in the color palette, I typically can like intuit into why and then ask particular questions around that. Yeah, I think I've always just focused on what I gain from a team, which is a greater breadth of work. I would say the biggest challenge has been back when I did WordPress sites and had a development team. There wasn't as much of a natural sort of connection. Like my designers, I'm like, okay, like we could go on like a boat together for a month and like have the best time. Developers is a different language, right? I always joke that I steal code. I don't really write it. So like a true developer, it's like, I'm very particular. I can see two spaces after a period. So when I send a mock-up in and it comes back to me developed and there's a lot of variety in the spacing or, the typography, I'm pretty geeky about typography. So what I've done is typically I train. And that's why it just really helps my team understand my desires, as a creative director. And then also helps figure out if it's the right fit, So I get that not everybody, wants to look at things in such a nuanced way as I do. And I do have to balance that. I remember getting out of my grad program and I'm like, am I going to do work to a grad level or to a commercial level? And it took me years to kind of remedy that because eventually my prices went up and I'm like, cool, there has to be just a general Live Large standard that we do. But yeah, I definitely sympathize with the beginner freelancer journey. That's why I created my course, because I think that's the most like area for friction because you're trying to do like stuff for cheap, but yet, it might actually take you longer than, years later for you to do that same project. And I think that can be the biggest downfall is when we charge too little, overwhelm ourselves with clients. And then that's when we kind of start hating what we do.
If you're enjoying this video, please take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you. So in 2021, you took it a little step further, not a little step, a big step further. You went to create a Live Large collective, right? That's what it's called?
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that? It's an educational platform for designers, from what I understand, right?
Yep.
And so I'd like to know what inspired you to start mentoring and what was the core mission of Live Large Collective?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I love designers. I'm a creative like through and through. I was born a creative. And I think, also being an introvert, I kind of fit that in there. We're not always the most natural like qualities that I think like Western world appreciates, especially America, right? Exploiting a creative like hurts my heart, and I see a lot of it, and I've been there, right? Where people are like, well, can't you just get that done? Can you make it look more designed? And I'm like, excuse me. So that's really fun. But what I find or have found through essentially running my first internship, so that was pre Live Large Collective, but that was just an area of kind of magic in my business. You know, we were able to come together every week. We were able to produce really great work, and we were all over the world. I actually never got to meet anybody in person yet. And so then I was invited to come teach at Academy of Art undergrad, and I just was watching students kind of, I don't say this kindly, but like struggle with a rigid curriculum, right? Because often in college, curriculums are outdated. And when we look at actually monetizing from our skill set, that's not often taught in university, at least the ones I've been around. And I think that's really frustrating. It's like we should be empowered to make money from our skill set. And I think that's equally as important. So that's when I started creating my first course. And I was like, I can turn this internship, it was a 6-week internship. And I was like, I can turn this into a course that goes a bit deeper and really mentors, especially beginner designers. And I do seem to attract a lot of, younger women. And I would have loved to have had that. I've gone through a lot of repetitive challenges, growing my business, and I would love to save, other designers that, so they can really stay in the joy of creating and this concept of being creators. And I think, when you understand the creator archetype, there are things we're inherently not good at. And so if we can support ourselves with that, either by outsourcing, automating, or just beefing up our skill set with that, which often is what we need to do when we're starting out, because we might not have the finances, to delegate, and maybe we don't have the tech yet or kind of structure to automate. So that's where I think like learning the skill set is really important. And yeah, I'm a big fan of structure and then creating within that structure. So I do a lot of, like, for example, my mood boards, they all have a template, but then like the mood boards themselves are really cool. So I think as creatives, sometimes we can get stuck in recreating everything all at once instead of focusing on the core, project or challenge. And so I help designers do that as well, just by providing a lot of that. So I'm like, you don't have to think about this aspect. All you need to do is, focus on the project. And I think a lot of times we just need a sounding board. And it's been a huge joy to watch young designers like really grow into their confidence, or maybe they have a client challenge while they're, working in my course or something, and they can bring that and we can talk through that. And then they can go back with an answer or with a, piece of communication that is empowered, with a little more confidence because, they had a platform to chat through that with. And I'm big on energy work too. So I think a lot of sales and how the process of a project goes is an energetic, like subjective sort of entity. And that's also something that I think in life we don't get to learn a lot about.
Right. Yeah. Well, and now through all of this, through the mentoring, through development of Live Large. Sorry, let me change this. I'm gonna start that question one more time.
No worries.
Okay. So through all of this and through your creation of Live Large Design and Live Large Collective, I'm curious if your creative process has changed through the years. What is your creative process, and how do you deal with that?
Oh, really good. Yeah, I do have a core process, and I think it's remained pretty consistent. I have my discovery. I get pretty quickly into visuals as quick as I can. The pieces I've built more into would be the strategies. So I've built a lot more. I pretty much had to fall in love with marketing. So, and that's something that's interesting. A lot of times as designers, I think the majority of the time we're in marketing departments. I've only worked corporate America like very briefly. So I don't know a lot about that, but we are often in marketing, and that's interesting because we're artists. And I'm like, that's not actually like, those are not two things that inherently go together. It's like you look at a musician and you're like, they're not just inherently in, marketing. But what I do love about being a designer is the focus on communication. And I think that's really fun to play with. So that's kind of what I get nerdy about, is like, I love seeing, is something effective or not? So I've gotten more into the tech, like more into KPIs, back end, looking at results. and conversions. So I do a lot of like sales pages and landing pages. So like I want to understand what's actually converting and how that's effective. So I can build you a beautiful brand. That's only as powerful as it brings you sales if you're in business. And I'm always B2B. So I think that piece is just really important. And what else? What else has evolved? You asked me about my process. So I think I have a pretty standard process. I remember learning it, and it didn't feel very clear to me as it was getting taught. So I don't know what I made up and, kind of teased out for myself and what everybody else does. But I have, my discovery process. I need to also take walks and daydream and be in nature so that like those ideas can percolate. And then I get into the visuals. But at this point, like, I'll be on a discovery call with a client and I'm already perceiving what would work for them. But I also have synesthesia, which that's really interesting. So I was like, perhaps that plays into it because I see things in colors sometimes, or see feelings in colors, which is really interesting.
Oh, that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, I spend a lot of time talking about the creative process when I'm teaching. Obviously, I think it's super important. In fact, every single project that I give, I include a list. It's a checklist they have to go through, research, mood boards, sketching, refinements, and all of that. And they have to get my signature as they go through the process so that by the end of my class, they'll have it ingrained in their who they are as designers. And then they can move forward from there. So I think it's very, very important for all of us, obviously.
Yeah, and you bring up a really important point of working off the computer. So I, especially with, I'm a Xennial, like I'm in the in-between era, but I had to draw as a kid because that's all we had. So I'm quite familiar or comfortable with that. And I think in our current era, there is this tendency to just jump to the computer, but we're so confined, and creativity doesn't always work within confinement. I know I said earlier that I like creating a structure and then working within that. But after discovery, I'm like a big proponent of things should always start off the computer and they should be messy. We should be sketching. We should be flowing out, 100 ideas for something very roughly so that we can narrow in on the best. And I think that can be challenging for all of us when we're a little bit time constrained.
Yeah. Absolutely. One last question about the Live Large Collective. I'm curious if that you can talk about an example or give me an example of how the collective made a difference in a designer's career path as a result of your mentorship.
I like that. Let's see here. Lots of great examples. I think my favorite is this young woman from Melbourne, and she's quite young. I think she was 19 when she came into the program, but extremely talented, an illustrator. So kind of neat because a little bit different than me. I think much more, fine artist and then bringing that to the computer. And introvert, quiet. And I just watched her like blossom through the course and like be energized. And you can really see that, and then make money, so like understand how to price. And I think a lot of designers struggle with like, how do I start out pricing? And especially with things like Fiverr, where people are charging $5, that can be challenging. So I support designers a lot with positioning, and then backing that positioning. So with her, I can't remember her particular niche, but she built her website within the course as well. And she gets a lot of feedback on that. And I think, those of us who, I was raised on feedback, so I can't even relate to a version of life where like there isn't a lot of feedback. Feedback means love to me. So not everybody's built that way, but I think we are. And when we get feedback, I think we feel much more confident. I keep coming with that word, but centered, clear with our work because it's gone through, different eyes. And I think she also really trusted me, which I think is I just really respect her ability to come in and do my process and trust it. And a lot of the kind of just technical side of it or business side of it was, like I was saying, kind of examples of contracts, systems to use. So I try to really make the business side simple so that, these designers could stay in their work. But yeah, it was really a joy to watch her. And I think watching her demeanor evolved was what was really fascinating to me. And her just like, she was always everything that she was, but she was able to see a path for like a business and making money. And she had some very specific goals because I think she might've still been living at home, something like that. And she had goals of getting an apartment, and, she was on that journey towards that.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And that must be fulfilling to be a part of that sort of journey for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. So guess what? We've actually made it all the way to the end of the conversation.
All right.
Thank you for being here. I do
My pleasure.
I've got two more questions actually,
Okay.
and they're tied together in terms of like sort of advice you might have for new designers. So what advice would you have for new creative professionals that are entering the industry, whether they're coming out of high school or coming out of college, jumping into the industry? What sort of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say something around curiosity, because I think being curious is so tied to being a designer. So like I walk down the street and I see, I love typography. So like I love to try to recognize fonts or evaluate logos. And I think just that awareness helps bring things into our sphere that then we can bring into our work. So I kind of see life as this constant canvas of inspiration, which sounds a little corny, but I'm always just curious. Like, I'm at the airport and I'm watching people, and I think that's a big part of being a designer. So I would say always stay curious. And if you fall out of that, it's like, okay, how do you get back into that? So for myself, I take myself on like dates. I go to the bookstore. Books are my other obsession. And so I love to go to the bookstore and I like grab probably 7 to 10 books and sit down with a coffee and I read a few pages from each book. And I just like looking at the typesetting. I like feeling what that feels like. So I think we all should spend part of our day. It doesn't have to be long, but seeing new stuff. And you can do that online too. I mean, with Pinterest and all this great stuff. And I don't mean this in a way that we're stealing other ideas. It's all, should feed into our inspiration. So I like mentorship. That would be my other suggestion is it's just faster to, learn from someone. And I think we feel, that connection, which I think lights us up. I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and she just, and I don't know if y'all have watched, she has one talk on creative courage, and I highly go watch that. I think you can Google Brene Brown plus talk for designers, but she just speaks to, you have to be in the arena, and we should only care about essentially opinions of others in the arena. So if you are getting some flack for X, Y, or Z, putting yourself out there is the hard part. And if we're playing the game, that's half the battle. And so I pretty much cry when I listen to her stuff, because it's very supportive of the creative soul and birthing something new. And I think there's a lot of replicated work out there. And that's something that kind of concerns me, is seeing designers that only have one aesthetic and every website looks the same. I mean, we should be designing towards our audiences. And I'm pretty critical towards that, because that's our job. So, that said, I think, it's also vulnerable to put our work out there, so we have to kind of balance that. And so mentorship or community or both, I think, can support our evolution and also just our joy as we move through these different stages, because we're going to make mistakes. You're going to have a client that says, I absolutely don't like that. Actually, okay, so this is a fun story. I do copy now as well, because I've taken enough copy courses that I like to work on the copy and the visuals kind of combined. And so I wrote the copy for I do a funnel in a day. It's a pretty low cost project. I was testing it, and I send the copy to the client, and she's like, I wish I could remember her exact words, but it was pretty bad. She was like, this is atrocious. It was something like that. And I was like, okay, cool. Information. And so that's, when clients come to me like that, I'm like, this is a safe place. Me understanding what you don't like is equally as important as me understanding what you do like, and we will get there. And I think when we create that space for our clients, they then can their nervous system can calm down, and they're like, okay, we're going to get there. But I just like to share that, because even after 12 years, I mean, I can read people pretty well these days. So usually I'm going to get positive feedback, right? But I remember those beginning days of sending work and like refreshing the email to be like, how would they perceive those logos? And okay, I have to say this one as well. How we present our work is just as important as the work itself. So I curate how my clients digest the work, especially branding, because if they're going to the bathroom and looking at those first round of logos, while they're sitting on a toilet, that's not the best representation of our work. And so I own my process as much as I can. I do a lot of video presentation. That doesn't mean we have to get on a live call every single time. But I think that's, something, whether you're creative, introvert, whatever, maybe that's not the most exciting part of it, trying to communicate it, but that's super, super important. And hopefully programs are teaching that. I think mine did, but people want to understand. They want to understand the concept behind the work. And I remember I got to do beer bottle labels in Alaska, and they were screen printed. They're really beautiful. But I did not have the best concept out of my coworkers, and mine got chosen because I showed the whole process. And they were just really into, the comprehensiveness of the concept. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, and now my second question has to do kind of actually in the same sort of vein as you were just talking about. Are there any specific skills or areas of expertise that you think that people should focus on for designers in the coming years?
Okay, so let's see, this might be controversial. I am a proponent of utilizing AI, in a way that supports the creative. So that does not mean AI is writing my sales page copy. It means I'm using AI to generate ideas, or actually as almost like a team member. So I called ChatGPT, I call him Chad because I treat him like a person. I'm like, Chad, what do you think of this? Which title's better? And he'll give me an idea. And I'm like, no, I don't like that, and we just go back and forth and back and forth. And it's kind of been the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, because I no longer have to wait till the next morning to like call a friend or have my team look at concepts. I now, in the middle of the night, have this entity that I can ask questions of. So I think integrating AI in a way that supports our work. I just saw the other day, someone was like, there's no need for designers anymore because we have AI generated branding. And I was like, oh yeah, well, we can tell. And that's fine if that's what you're going for, like a super futuristic, contrived look. Cool. But I think we still need to stay grounded in, in my program, we would not Photoshop stuff, for example. And so meaning like, now we have apps that can change our faces. We like literally, I actually was astounded when I discovered that, because it takes me so long to like change someone's nose in Photoshop, and I won't do that. But so I am kind of a purist in that way, but I think utilizing tech smartly in a way that supports our skill set. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but trying to stay attuned to like the new technology, and it's really important. When I started my career, Flash was still existent, and then it went away. And I watched people just go out of business, and because they didn't want to learn the next thing. And so I think that's where that curiosity, we should also probably have some time every week where we're just learning something. And so for me, these no code platforms that I use for these e-learning platforms has really evolved my business and allowed me to monetize and profit more, because it's utilizing my skill set stronger. So if young designers can find ways that they're just really excited about some of the technology out there, I think that could be really supportive of us. And I remember when AI was starting to come out, people were like, are you scared of it taking jobs? And I'm like, never. The creative, I think we have the best jobs in the world, because like nothing will ever replace, aspects of what we do. Right. That said, I love Grammarly for making sure that my grammar is correct. It's the same as using a calculator. It's like, I'd rather use my brain calories for the more human, deeper type of things.
I totally agree, and I use it the same way for a lot of the work that I do in my educational endeavors. When I'm creating assignments, or I need to create a lecture, I will go out and use ChatGPT. I'll use Chad. I'm going to start calling it Chad.
Please do.
But yeah, and absolutely, it helps to sort of support what I want to do, and then I hone it to make it my own voice, obviously.
Totally.
So
And I think that brings up a really good point of work. You know, if you're using AI, it's like almost treated like a team member, and you bounce it between, you know, but you should always be touching it before it goes out. And I'll give this little, I can totally tell who uses AI for writing and they don't curate the verbiage. So I don't know if y'all are seeing like everything says unlock right now. And I commented on somebody's post the other day because they were like, unlock the, I don't know, the humanity of like where we're going with AI. And I'm like, you do know that AI wrote that, right? Because like a human doesn't talk like that. So you can kind of pick up on like the patterns of technology. Yes. And I think as designers, we're pattern driven. So just pay attention to that, you know, and now I make sure that's not in any of my text.
Excellent. That is very interesting. And once again, thank you so much, Adele, for being here and taking your time. I appreciate your time and being on my show. And let's keep in touch.
I would love that. Yeah. Well, thank you for what you're doing for young designers.